This is the TJ Evans Show, and here's my uncle TJ Evans.
How's it going out there? I'm your host TJ Evans, and this is the TJ Evans Show. Today we want to talk about the United States and how the division in this country came about. Because here we're looking at the same news stories, but we're coming up with two different solutions or two different variations of what actually is going on. Now we have one side of the country who looks at it from an emotional aspect, and then we have another side looking at it from a logical aspect. And how did this happen? Well, it's split along the party lines because the Democratic Party has become very skilled at using emotional trigger points to tug at the heartstrings of the population. And these trigger points, just three of them, are racism, the LGBT community, and now with COVID. If you use these things, then nobody will want to ask any questions. And there's a hierarchy in it, but yet it can't be consistent because you can't be consistent with emotions, especially when you're not trying to use logic in it at all. An example, this John Gruden situation. We see that John Gruden had sent out some emails, and the whole story was about how he was being racist and homophobic. Me personally, I didn't pay any attention to it because I know John Gruden is a football coach for a professional team, and football coaches aren't nice. And also, these emails surfaced from 10 years ago. I can't believe that the same individual from 10 years ago is the same individual from today, because people changed their thought process. But what happened was people didn't do their due diligence and look deeper into the story, because apparently this Las Vegas Raiders head coach emails only surfaced because the NFL was doing an investigation on the Washington Redskins for sexual assault. Why was this swept under the rug? Well, apparently in the hierarchy, being racist and homophobic is more important than women being abused. And how does his players feel about him? Do they see the same thing that the news media is portraying?
This guy for 3 years now. I've never felt a certain type of way about him. You know what I'm saying? He's never rubbed me a certain way, like that type of way. I mean, what he said was what he said at the end of the day too. But I mean, I definitely trust him. And I mean, man, it was 10 years ago. I mean, people grow.
But this can also tie into what was going on with R. Kelly. R. Kelly, if you don't know, was sentenced, and well, I don't know if he was sentenced, but he's being incarcerated. He was found guilty for running a sex trafficking ring. And a lot of people on social media, which is the most dangerous tool and useful at the same time, were trying to compare R. Kelly and what he did to what Hugh Hefner did with running the Playboy empire. And the only reason why they came to this comparison is because Hugh Hefner is white and R. Kelly is black. But the stories are completely different. Emotionally, you can just look at a black man and a white man, and they somewhat doing the same thing. But yet, if you go logically and go into the details, you will see that Hugh Hefner actually had women who were of age. These women willingly participated and were paid. They were not forced to stay in his home. And also, they got married, had families. Some of them became millionaires, models, actresses. So I don't see how the comparison was made, only if you want to get into the emotional aspect of it. But I can't see why would you do that and try to compare what this sick man, Robert Kelly, did by, one, urinating on minors, stalking high schools, having women locked in his home, using his employees to gain more young women and to pretty much turn them into his sex slaves. Totally different things. But yet, the news media, social media, would try to make this seem comparable to Hugh Hefner. And it was the same thing they tried to do with what happened on January 6th. The quote-unquote insurrection on the Capitol. Was it an insurrection? We're already seeing that the FBI did dirt, and we already know that the FBI and the DOJ are nothing but tools for the Democratic Party and the oligarchy who actually runs America. And we see that they're trying to say that these people did wrong. And these people did the most heinous thing ever in American history. But yet, just a few months beforehand, Black Lives Matter was literally burning down cities, burning down police stations, courthouses, capitol buildings in different states.
Fire engines can't get in here. There is no ability to bring anybody in here to solve this problem. So I want to be clear in how I characterize this. This is a mostly a protest. It is not generally speaking unruly.
I just don't see how Black Lives Matter protesters can be released from prison, from jail, after being caught burning down cities, being caught vandalizing. Trump supporters actually were murdered during these riots, and yet the January 6th individuals who did not actually have a full-fledged plan and was trying to be peaceful at first, how these individuals are being held without bail. But yet Joe Biden and his campaign, his administration actually posted bail for Black Lives Matter members. It's disgusting, and I don't understand why we as American people can't see this. I don't want to tell you what to see, but I'm saying I want you to just watch the news stories. Look at how they're treating these people. Same thing with the shooter from Texas. This young black man went to his school and shot 4 individuals. Now they're using the term bullying because that's another trigger point, because as long as somebody's getting bullied, then you can do whatever you want to defend yourself. But I don't see how they can say that this young man was right for going back after being assaulted, which they claim. I don't know because I didn't see the video, because it's pretty hard to look at, because I mean it's just hard to point out the actual individual who's doing something. But they're saying that he's being abused or bullied by a classmate, and from his picture after the fight, you tell me if he looks like he was being abused or bullied. But they're saying that because he was being bullied, that he can go back into the school, or he had a right to shoot other individuals. I mean, his mom came out and said this.
He was scared. He was afraid. There's a video that's all out on social media, and it shows that he was being attacked. It wasn't just one person that would attack him and bully him, taking his money, harassing him due to the fact because he had more things than maybe others. It takes us all. It takes us all to stand together about this bullying. It could have been a situation where he took the other turn and decided to commit suicide.
This was not a bullying incident. And I just want to take that narrative out of the equation.
They even had a welcome home party for him after he posted a $75,000 bail for shooting people. Now, mind you, the news media didn't want to cover this because he was a school shooter who was a black man, and he was arrested by the police without any incident because he turned himself in. He dropped his gun. They couldn't make a big deal of it because everybody knows that black people don't do school shooting, even though we make up 90% of school shootings. And black people always get shot by the police and are unable to turn themselves in. So the narrative couldn't be spun. And at the same time, I had to think about what happened in the, what was his name, Rittenhouse case, where he had an AR-15, young white man had an AR-15, and he shot a few individuals, those individuals being Black Lives Matter protesters who were trying to set a gas station on fire, and he stopped them from doing it, and he was protecting himself because they tried to assault him after doing it. Just look at the video, how it actually initiated. So, What he did was he defended himself from these individuals who were killed and shot. A couple of them were sexual predators. But the news media didn't want to put that out because CNN, CNN doesn't want you to do your own research. Matter of fact, they don't want you to do your own research. They already told you. But they portrayed him as being a white supremacist, even though he only shot white people. And they was upset because the police arrested him without incident. But it was because that he turned himself in the same way that this young black man did in Texas. But he didn't get a bail. Oh, matter of fact, his bail was like $1 million or something like that. Either way, how could an individual who we know shot 4 people in a school get a $75,000 bond, but yet someone who was actually defending themselves is seen as a racist white supremacist? Why is race even being brought up in stories? Have y'all ever sat back and just asked yourselves that? How come every time we hear a story about American citizens doing harm to one another, why is the first thing that is brought up is race? We know about gang violence in Chicago. Why don't they say this black man shot another black man? Because that story wouldn't go anywhere. And in order to get clicks, we have to deal with race. We have to hit trigger points. We have to deal with race, the LGBT community, or COVID. The country is split because of these emotional reasons. And there is nothing more, I guess the best evidence you can see is what goes on Rotten Tomatoes. If you don't know, there's a new Dave Chappelle, special came out, and it's getting pretty good reviews from the audience, not the critics, because the critics are part of the mainstream media. They're part of the oligarchy. They're part of the people who are supposed to control us and move the culture how they want us to move.
And all of this is so childish because, did you know God created us with different genitalia? I win. Well, we're animals. There are animals that switch their genders.
But Dave Chappelle, being the king that he is, he's a juggernaut out here, and you really can't cancel him. He was on the verge of going into a cancel war with this individual who is just now part of the LGBTQ plus community. Just a couple of years ago, when he transitioned to a woman, this white man transitioned into a white woman, is also a writer on a show about black people on Netflix. Go figure how that happened. It's cool. Well, she is offended about Dave Chappelle's jokes on the transgender community. But yet she never got to see the whole thing. I think that she just looked at the title or looked at one joke because comedy is dead. But I think she just heard transgender and just was triggered and said, you know what, we need to cancel Dave Chappelle. Without knowing that Dave Chappelle's special is dedicated to his transgender friend who committed suicide and who was also a comedian who could take a joke and was pushed into a corner where she had to commit suicide because of the blue check marks, the LGBTQ plus community. Individuals like this. It's just terrible. But here's how Dave Chappelle closed it.
Transgender community, I am more than willing to give you an audience, but you will not summon me. You cannot come if you have not watched my special from beginning to end. You must come to a place of my choosing and a time of my choosing. And thirdly, you must admit that Hannah Gadsby is not funny.
I don't see anything hateful about that. I see that was a very heartwarming dedication to his friend. But if you look at Rotten Tomatoes and you look at the specials that they do and you see the audience versus the critics' reviews of it, you can see that the American people really aren't totally crazy. We understand what's good entertainment and what's not. but the critics, they want to push a narrative and propaganda on us to make us think that everyone in the world thinks this way. Everyone in America thinks this way, but that's untrue. We can tell just by the reviews, even down to how we raise our children. This is where people have to pick a side because there's no longer being in the middle. There is no gray area. It's either black or white. You either choose right or you choose wrong. You can no longer just be like, you know what? Either way, I don't really care, because now they're going for the kids like I've been trying to tell people for the longest. And one of the ways they're trying to do it is pushing this agenda of the LGBTQ plus community, and also with sexual education. We see that children should not be burdened with sex. Sexual education was introduced into the school system around the 1970s. And it was introduced by this doctor who actually performed pedophilic experiments.
Kinsey was complicit in the sexual abuse of children. His own published works included data tables showing children as young as 2 months being, quote, stimulated to, quote, orgasm, while screaming and writhing in pain. He had this data on 200 young boys under the age of 15.
But yet this happened to slide in. So now we're in 2021 where they're trying to push different topics on children as far as different genders, as far as different sexual positions, and also just trying to make it normal for kids to want to have sex. And from the beginning, parents knew that this was a bad idea, especially when it came down to the argument of should there be a gendered restroom in schools? A lot of parents on the right and libertarians, they said, no, we shouldn't try to change what we have now. We should have a boys' restroom and a girls' restroom, not just in school, just in society, because there are actual perverts out there who would try to do something nasty. And we see stories like this on the news, but yet the news media tries to bury it. And we say, all right, one day someone will get raped. Guess what? That day has happened. In Loudoun County, there was a man who was portrayed on the news media as an irate man yelling at the school board. And this is the video that they showed everyone.
And believe the boy is wrong. God says men and women are united in love, not men and men or women and women. I also think that transgender is wrong too. You are who you are. You cannot change that.
She's trying to disrupt things, guys. She's just trying to disrupt things. Just continue on over here. Let's continue on.
Now, if you watch that video, you can only see a crazy man just wild, and he's going to jail because he shouldn't be talking to the school board this way, threatening people. But yet, the news media decided to ignore the fact that the reason why he was triggered was because there was an individual in the crowd who was wearing a rainbow shirt that said that we don't believe your daughter. Why is this important? It's because his daughter was actually sexually assaulted by a fellow student at her school who was a male, dressed in a skirt, not transgender, just dressed in a skirt, and was able to use the girls' restroom. What happened? She's a minor, and bad stuff happened to her. And this young man, and matter of fact, the school called the father to tell him and confirm what happened. He didn't know anything of it. So they did the great kit, and came out that this young man did do this. And the school board said, we're going to handle it. The school said, we're going to handle it. They didn't handle it. The young man was placed on house arrest, And then a few weeks later, what does he do? He assaults another female individual because he is able to. He's not going to get any punishment. And when this story is more and more the story surfaces, we see that the superintendent of this county, he's actually about to be under investigation, which he should be, and he should be thrown in jail as well as this young man who assaulted these young girls. But when are we going to stop? When are we going to stop acting like we don't see what's going on? We already know that things are bad wrong in America, and it is because that we're not addressing situations logically. We can't go by what the left says because it's not consistent. Simple. Feminism and transgenderism can't live in the same house. Feminism says that women are unique, important, and they're strong. Transgenderism says that men can be women, so yeah. Who are y'all? We have to change something going on in America. And the major issue that we're split by is COVID. And we see that COVID has been a lie from the beginning, what we've been taught. We see these individuals lying to us all the time about it. But I'm not even going to speak on that. I want you to listen to Joe Rogan when he even questions a doctor who lied on him about the treatment of COVID.
What? But so for you, Joe Rogan.
Yes.
I would say you've had it.
Yes.
So now get one shot of the vaccine.
No.
Why not?
Because I have better immunity than I would if I was vaccinated. Right?
Yes.
Don't I?
I think your immunity is really good.
So why, if I've already gotten through COVID and I was really only sick for a day, and then 5 days later I was negative, and I do have the natural antibodies now, why would I take a chance in getting vaccinated on top of that?
By the way, I'm glad you're better. I'm glad it only lasted a day.
You're probably the only one at CNN that's glad.
Do you notice that he's avoiding Joe Rogan's questions? Well, it's because that Joe Rogan is putting him against the corner and asking solid questions.
No. We're not.
The rest of them are all lying about me taking horse medication. And we should talk about that.
That bothered you.
It should bother you, too. They're lying at your network about people taking human drugs versus drugs for veterinary.
Calling it a horse dewormer is not a flattering thing. I get that.
It's a lie. It's a lie on a news network, and it's a lie that's a willing... That's a lie that they're conscious of. This is not a mistake.
Yeah.
They're unfavorably framing it as veterinary medicine.
Well, the FDA put this thing out. You saw that. Did you see that thing that the FDA put out?
What did the FDA put out?
It was a tweet, and it was snarky. I admit it. They said, "You are not a horse, you are not a cow, stop taking this stuff," or something like that.
Why would you say that when you're talking about a drug that's been given out to billions and billions of people, a drug that was responsible for one of the inventors of it making the Nobel Prize in 2015? This is ivermectin.
You got
this
it with
right
you.
Here. Somebody gave it to me.
All right, hang on. The thing is, we're like going so fast. Like I feel like I'm missing. Do
you think that's a problem? That your news network lies?
Well, I don't.
Dude.
And that was a doctor from CNN, a doctor from a major news organization who y'all watch. Y'all get all the information from them. We're living in a society where people believe that inflation is a good thing.
White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain retweeted a message yesterday, not once but twice, that inflation and supply chain issues are high-class issues. But some of the sharpest price increases over the last month included products that every American buys: beef products, chicken, eggs, regular unleaded gasoline, laundry equipment, furniture, clothing, the list goes on. Why would Ron Klain tweet that, and would you agree that that's a little bit tone deaf?
Do you think 2 tweets means more? I'm just curious. So just for context, what Ron Klain retweeted was a tweet from the former chairman of Economic Advisors, Jason Furman, where he said, for full context, which I think is important, most of the economic problems we're facing, inflation, supply chains, are high-class problems. What he went on to say is, we wouldn't have had them if unemployment rate was still 10%. We would instead have had a much worse problem. So I think the point here is, well, there are some critics who are saying, what some of these critics are saying is, we don't know if they're saying that what they thought was great was when the unemployment rate was double what it is today, or when people were locked in their homes and therefore gas prices were lower. We're at this point because the unemployment rate has come down and been cut in half, because people are buying more goods, because people are traveling, and because demand is up, and because the economy is turning back on. So Jason Furman, of course, is more than capable of speaking or tweeting for himself, obviously, and providing any additional context. But what the point is here is that we are at this point because we've made progress in the economy. And what would be worse, in our view, is if the unemployment rate was at 10%, people were out of work, hundreds of thousands of people were still dying of COVID, and people weren't able to lose their homes. So that's the full context.
It was clear in March of 2020, when COVID hit, that the supply chains across the world had been disrupted. Even as the sort of work to fight back against COVID proceeded, it was crystal clear that things were not improving on supply chain. People couldn't get dishwashers and furniture and treadmills delivered on time, not to mention all sorts of other things. So why is it...
The tragedy of the treadmill that's delayed.
Right, the problem.
How could it be better for us that live in the United States where our gas is now $3.15 versus the $1.53 that it was last year? How could you stand these people lying to you? Stop being force-fed information and do your own research. I cannot stress that enough. We're in a country of freedom. Don't sell your freedom for safety. And especially when the government says that they're going to keep you safe. Because how can Joe Biden actually say that he is doing this, trying to force mask mandates after he said he wouldn't, that he's trying to keep you safe, that he's trying to force vaccines? How is he trying to keep you safe? You're unable to buy vegetables and fruits at a cheaper price than sweet cakes. You're unable to feed the homeless without having a permit. How are they trying to keep us safe? But I want you to do your own research. Ask questions. Pay attention to what's going on and don't be force-fed information. Google it. Matter of fact, Bing it. Go to the government websites. Don't believe in the science. Believe in actual science. Because you never heard of the science while you was in elementary, middle, or high school. It was science. People did research and you were able to question things. So continue to question things. I'm your host, TJ Evans, and this is the TJ Evans Show. Y'all do your own research. Y'all have a good one.